And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and as always, it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday. We have a lot to talk about on today's show. Before I get into what's on today's rundown for today's show, I just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And then for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. And that is where you can find all the exclusive content, whether it's for my podcasts or all of the other podcasts we have as well. So I just wanted to go over that before we get into what we're going to talk about. Obviously, and of course on the bottom also it has the link for the donations and tips as well here. So for today's show, obviously the first topic, we're going to go over last night's game between the Chargers and the Cowboys. Cowboys picking up a win 20-17. So they improved to 4-2 on the season. I just knocked out my earpiece. They improved to 4-2 on the season. Chargers, they dropped 2-3. So we'll talk about that in a second. The second part of the show, we will get into the power rankings that were released this week. So I'll give my thoughts on that. In the third part of the show, I'm going to talk about the Detroit Lions and whether or not I think they're Super Bowl contenders after this week, going into Week 7 now. And then for the final part of the show, we will go through the current standings throughout the league, and where all the teams currently stand at the moment. So let's get right into the first topic, which is talking about last night's game between the Cowboys and the Chargers. So I had the Cowboys winning this game last night, so I ended up being right. So I ended up I don't really want to call it salvaging my week, but I ended up getting this game right. Cowboys, like 20-17, of course, as you see on the bottom. But yeah, not a lot of scoring in this game. You would think with these two offenses that there was going to be, it was going to be a higher scoring game, but that was not the case. It was kind of sluggish through most of it. But the Cowboys, that was a huge win for them. Last night, Dak Prescott, 21-30, 272 yards passing and a touchdown. He also had an 18-yard touchdown run in the first quarter. And it was a nice. I thought it was a nice play call. He faked it to Pollard. They actually could have lost the ball there, but Dak was able to keep it and take it right up the gut through the middle and completely faked out the Chargers defense. And he was able to take it in, and that was his. That was the first score of the game for the Cowboys. He actually ended up being their leading rusher. Tony Pollard only rushed for 30 yards. CeeDee Lamb was their leading receiver, 7 receptions for 117 yards. Tony Pollard had 80. He had a big 60-yard reception, which, was kind of like a play that he made on his own, really. He broke a couple of tackles and got the Cowboys set up there. Brandon Cooks, he had 4 receptions for 36 yards and a touchdown, so he scored his first touchdown with the Cowboys. Stephon Gilmore had his first pick as a Dallas Cowboy, and Jalen Tolbert, he had a fumble in the game. That was actually on the towards the end of the game. That actually set up the Chargers to score to tie the game. Was that fumble, and that was on the punt. And it was kind of interesting because the Chargers kind of knocked one of the Cowboys players into him, so he wasn't able to make the play, and then another Cowboys guy came over. Well, I think it was Tolbert. Yeah, he touched it, and then the Chargers jumped on it. So that set up the Chargers, and they were able to capitalize off of that. And that was late in the game. That was in the fourth quarter. So they so they said that it was down, but then they reviewed the play. And, so it ended up being Chargers ball, and then they scored a touchdown on that, and that was Justin Herbert passing to Gerald Everett on 4th down. But then the Cowboys, on the final drive of the game, or not the final drive of the game, but, final drive for them, 14 plays, 54 yards, almost 5 minutes. They went down the field, kicked the field goal to go 20-17, and then Herbert threw the pick to Stephon Gilmore. And then they just kneed it down, and that was the end of the game. And, so then on the other side with the Chargers stats, Justin Herbert went 22 of 37, 227 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Was sacked in this game. Chargers really couldn't run the ball here. Austin Eckler, he did make his return to the field yesterday, had 14 carries for only 27 yards. Herbert had 20 yards. Yeah, the Chargers really couldn't do anything on the ground. Keenan Allen continues to have a really good season. He was their leading receiver, 7 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Joshua Palmer had 4 receptions for 60 yards. Eckler had 4 for 35. Gerald Everett had a touchdown, like I mentioned before. A very low-scoring game, a big game for the Cowboys. They were able to secure the win. And, we'll see what happens now going forward. I mean, the Chargers, I still think they're a wild card team. But, that last night wasn't very encouraging. And also Justin Herbert, he's dealing with an injury. He was wearing like a sleeve around his non-throwing hand. So, he was kind of off last night. We'll see what happens going forward. But they got a tough game in Arrowhead this week. So, we'll see what happens there. And, for the Cowboys, I mean, that was a win that's a game they should win, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, they still didn't look great offensively, but, Brandon Cooks, got a touchdown. You'd like to see them run the football better with Tony Pollard. Obviously, he did have that big, reception, but that was, kind of a, he did that all by himself. That was kind of a short pass that, went almost the distance. But you want to see him running the football better. But they got CeeDee Lamb involved. He did very well last night. So that's encouraging. The defense, held up for the most part. So a good win for the Cowboys. We do actually have a comment in the chat. Kashan, who, is the host of the college football podcast and the basketball podcast. So he's asking about his Commanders, saying, what's the deal with his Commanders? Now, that's obviously a team the Cowboys will have coming up on their schedule and who's in their division. I mean, listen, Sam Howell's looked good. Sam Howell has looked good. Did have a rough game against the Bears, but, still, well, in the beginning. But he ended up almost passing for 400 yards. He's doing some good things with the Commanders. The defense, forced 3 turnovers on Sunday against the Falcons, so that's encouraging as well. I think they're a team that's heading in the right direction. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but, you got to like what Sam Howell is doing offensively for them now with Eric Bieniemy being there as their offensive coordinator. So, you got to like what they're doing. So that's kind of my thoughts with the Commanders. But back to this game. Just again, very sluggish. Dak Prescott, he was okay last night. But I don't know. For me, like people are talking about, like on First Take, there's a topic. I think, are they in the same tier as the Eagles? I still think the Eagles are better. But again, that's a game that they should win. And, now they're 4-2. And listen, that's big for them. Because if they drop to 3-3, I mean, and they got a tough schedule coming up. I mean, they play the Lions, they play Seattle, they play Buffalo, Miami. You still got to play the Eagles twice. So there's a lot of tough games on the Cowboys' schedule moving forward. And this was one of those games that they should win, and that's exactly what they did. Now, I'm not going to, sit here and say, yeah, that they're back now. No, I mean, I still think that, they're a team. They're a playoff team. They're going to make the wild card, but they're going to get knocked out because I just think there are teams that are better than them. I still think the Eagles are better than them. The Lions are better than them. And, of course, the 49ers are. Obviously, 2 of those 3 teams had rough weeks losing, but I still think that the Cowboys, they have ways to go before, you could really say anything about them being, in the same tier as these other teams. So, yeah. And then also Kashan says there's rumors around the area that Bieniemy could be the new head coach next year. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, Ron Rivera hasn't really taken that team far since he's taken over. So, and I think a lot of people have been talking about Bieniemy, actually getting a chance to be a head coach. So, you know what? If that's the case, that'd be good for him. See what he could do. But there are some encouraging signs of what this offense has, been able to do and what Sam Howell's been able to do this year. So, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, with the Cowboys, back to that again. Again, another great comment there. I just for me, I just still look at the Cowboys as probably like the fourth best team in the NFC at the moment. I think the Lions have really kind of, put themselves, in the conversation, kind of closing the gap, and we'll get into that in the third part of the show. I just look at them as the third best team. Cowboys, I think, are fourth. But again, like the NFC really, it's top heavy. So, the Cowboys kind of by default are like, top 5 team, but in the conference. Now, overall, I would not put them as a top 5 team. Maybe top 10, but, not top 5. They still got more things they have to do. And I'm not a Dak Prescott believer. I'm not. I really don't think he's the guy for them. I don't think he can bring them to the promised land. He's a solid quarterback, but I just don't think he's the guy that's going to bring the Cowboys to the Super Bowl. I think their best chance of winning was 2016. That was their best chance right there because they had a loaded, they had a great, the best offensive line in football. You had prime Zeke. You had arguably they were the offensive rookies of the year. Those two guys, practically. I think it was given to Dak, but I think that was their best shot. They were the 1 seed, but that just that didn't happen. For the Chargers, I mean, Justin Herbert's not 100%. I think the other thing too is they kind of miss Mike Williams. I think that's also going to hurt them, going forward. Keenan Allen's having a great season, and Joshua Palmer is a nice receiver for them, and you get Eckler back, which is huge. But I don't know. I think for me, I probably, they're going to be fighting for a wild card spot. But it doesn't get any easier now because now they got to go to Arrowhead to play against the Chiefs. And if Herbert continues to play, like he did yesterday, it's going to be kind of a rough game for the Chargers, especially because the Chiefs' defense has looked pretty good this year. So, although the offense, is a different story, but the Chiefs' defense in Arrowhead, they've looked good. So, we'll see if the Chargers could get back on track here. Cowboys, they go into the bye week feeling good now after picking up a win there. And again, another skirmish before the game started. They were both teams were going at it. So yeah, I don't know what's been going on lately, but yeah. So but yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, Cowboys, they after they come out of the bye, they'll be playing against the Rams. So that could definitely be a dicey game. Even though I haven't really the Rams. That's a winnable game. The Rams haven't looked bad, but they haven't looked like, how they were like, the Super Bowl year. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it with the first topic of the show. So with that, we are going to take our first break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss the NFL Power Rankings that were released after this week. So stick around. And we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.